Major Rachel Stouter, and I am the new Indianapolis area commander for the Salvation Army. My husband and I have lived in the Indianapolis area again for the last 4 years, and I've just recently transitioned roles. And I was saying that when I came here today, I expected to know Mary, and I expected to know Duke, who is my driver today. But I didn't expect kind of old home week. I know a lot of you, and so I appreciate your support of the Salvation Army, and I look forward to getting to work with you as we continue on with our projects. You most likely already know we are in full swing for Coats for Kids and Angel Tree and all of the exciting opportunities that we have coming up, and I look forward to getting to know most of you and what you're passionate about as well. So thank you for such a warm welcome.
Thank you, Major Rachel. We are now going to have our Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm not sure who is going to, Mary?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And a rounding patriotic song. What are we going to sing? My country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. Of thee I sing, land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. Jay is going to give us the invocation. Is he here?
Jay? Me? Yep. Okay, you have it?
Yep, it's up there.
Okay. You know, you got the wrong, Jay.
You go to church.
Get an assignment.
Right there.
It's not punishment, Jay, we're excited.
Yeah. Okay. Let us pray for all the families and individuals who have started anew in this country. For those who are beginners or career-focused English classes to improve their skills, may they find satisfaction and success in the learning process and not become discouraged. With a new school year, we are approaching children attending classes here for the first time. Let us support those people so that they can gain knowledge. We ask that you bless our immigrant and refugee neighbors and help us for their needs and our needs, and we use our gifts and skills to make them better and our community better. Amen.
A few announcements before we proceed any further. The Circle City Action Club liaison, football committee member, and former president, Rob Schlegel. Is Rob here today? 40 years with the Downtown Kiwanis Club.
Thank you, I'm really not that old.
Former president and Abe Lincoln committee member and Speedway Key Club liaison, Steve Willem, 29 years. And Karen Burns, foundation board member, outgoing bell ringing chair, and former president, 23 years. Taylor Jacoby, 2 years. Mary Bolk, 30 years. And I'd also like to give Mary her Ruby K pin for recruiting 5 new members since joining Kiwanis. You're very welcome. Okay, what was this one for?
Jeff is,
Hmm?
Jeff is, so you're on page 2 now.
Oh, on page 2, okay, thanks. Okay, another pen to Jeff Otis for his gift to the Kiwanis Children's Fund. Is Jeff here?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
This year's golf outing on Monday, September 19, supports Riley Children's Hospital. And we're asking that you fill a golf cart so that we can fill the Magic Castle cart. This is a great way to support Riley Hospital for Children. And our own Kiwani, Bob Baxter, and his initiative relating to the Children's Hospital, which provides smile therapy to so many of our kids hospitalized at Riley. There's more information, as a matter of fact, at your table and on our website. And I'd now like to invite Eric to the podium.
I'm just gonna speak from back here.
Oh, good, okay.
So, I like your courts for cards, we'll just call it courts for cards. So, yeah, it's Monday, September 19th at Eagle Creek. It's $400 foursome, and whole sponsorships are available for $500 each. We look forward to having everybody back, and give me a call if you have any questions, email me with any questions, and I look forward to seeing everybody out there. Thanks for your past support.
Thanks, Eric. And we have some perfect attendance for people who certainly deserve a certificate. Nancy Ulrich's perfect attendance for October 1 through September 30th, October 1, 2020, September 30th, 2021.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Tom Dunham, is Tom here? And Tom, perfect attendance for October 1, 2020 through September 30th, 21.
How many years is that, Tom?
46.
46.
46.
And Duke Haddock, for the same period of time for October 1, 2020, September 30th, 2021. I thought I saw Duke. Yeah, he's here. And Major Brandon Lee.
No, that's afterwards.
Later. I was gonna say.
It's your first time. We're just buttering you up.
I see, it's recruitment. I see that. This is so I know she always has.
Eric, did you have some things to say?
You already did.
He did?
I touched on the golf outing, so the big news really with so many of us back in person is just giving Nancy Ulrich her round of applause for our club president-elect.
Okay, Trina is going to give us a rundown on future programs.
I'll follow Eric's lead, shout from the back. Next week is a program that a lot of our members have asked for. INTD Sergeant Kevin Evans will be here, starting the National Night Out, talking about police issues around Indianapolis and downtown. So please help turn out folks. I think this is one that'll be really interesting for guests to attend as well. And then another that'll be appealing both to members and guests. We have National New York Times tech reporter Chris Nichol has done a look at Apple after Steve Jobs, the impact of that. We're looking to have at least 50 folks on the Zoom call, so please extend to your network. Checkpoint, who's been a guest with us before, is also passing it on to theirs. We'd like to have a great showing. This opportunity. Rest of the programs are in your newsletter. We've got a lot of exciting things coming up. Thanks.
And Mary is here to introduce our speaker.
Yes.
and guests.
Major Brandon Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank everyone who brought a guest today. If I could name them and you stand up so you could get a warm Kiwanis welcome. Cassandra Sanborn and Yan Yan from Exodus. Mike Farner, guest of Nancy Ballricks and her handsome husband. Diane and Jim Quinn are guests of mine, they're my cousins. Mike McCrory, spouse of Pat McCrory. Okamoto Kyoko from the IUPUI CKI Club. And now I would love to introduce, and I'm excited to introduce Brandon Lee. Brandon and I were in Iraq together, supporting a Special Forces battalion. Brandon was the ICU nurse for me there. He was the first nurse practitioner that Wishart ever hired. Now they have 160 nurse practitioners, so he led the way there. He's commanded multiple units in the National Guard and Reserves. The last time I talked to him on the phone a couple of weeks ago, he said, "Let me call you back. I'm just checking out of my hotel in Liberia." So he's had an expanded experience with the military. He's currently active Guard Reserve with the National Guard at Camp Atterbury as the Assistant Chief of Clinical Services. And I asked him to come and speak about the experience he had with all the Afghanis that came through here as they come through to assimilate here in America. So I'm excited to welcome my friend, Major Brandon Lee.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? First, I want to apologize for a couple things. First, I am, actually there's one on this too. There it is. So what's supposed to happen is when you do a formal presentation, you're supposed to be in your ASUs to present. However, as I have a broken wheel, I had my Achilles surgery last week on Monday. So I'm in a boot for a little bit. And so therefore the cast underneath would not quite fit right. So I have no disclosures, and this presentation I'm going to give has no classified information. So let's get started. There we go. Here's my agenda. These are all the points I'm going to talk about during this, each slide. But I'm going to go over my roles real quick. What Mary mentioned is I'm the Assistant Chief of Clinical Services at Camp Atterbury. So I'm one of two full-time active soldiers, and being a nurse practitioner and being a provider for the National Guard. So we deal a lot of our retention physicals as well as our redeployment physicals. I'm also a flight surgeon. And so what's happened is, it'll go back. So what will end up happening is I was asked to come on when we heard the warning order that Camp Atterbury may be nominated to be a refugee resettlement base. And what I thought I was going to be on for a week or so, as medical plans, help the installation get set up, and then typically the active duty comes in, they take over, and things go great. Well, what ends up happening is the active duty came, and there wasn't a medical officer, there weren't other physicians. What happened is actually we brought the Navy in, a Navy hospital group, 85 members from 3 different locations, Hawaii, San Diego, and Portsmouth, Virginia. So they were super excited to be in the Midwest going into the fall. And but the crazy thing is, the ramp up, when we found out that this was happening, it was insanely busy. I have typically 2 phones. I had 2 phones plus an officer with 2 phones and another person, all talking to have conversations with different people at the same time. So the beginning of this was was crazy. And then tell my wife, it's like, hey, you know, I'm only going to be doing this for 2 weeks. She's like, yeah, they're not going to let you go. I was like, no, they're going to. I'm a glass half full guy, and so then, as you see, it'll change. So what's happened is I actually pick up new jobs as it happens. So when the active duty did come in, we became Task Force Camp Atterbury, Indiana, and then I became the medical officer and still maintain these other duties as well. And so became the medical officer for the task force. And then when the Navy came in, well, I was the Army, because I was the Army liaison officer for the Navy. However, this was a joint operation, so very unique. What happened was the powers that be sent an Air Force EMEDS, which is an Air Force hospital, mobile hospital. They sent it to Camp Atterbury. They sent Army personnel on an Army base. So it was a true joint effort. And so basically, to be able to speak Army to the other entities, I picked up another title. And so then, out of necessity, one of the things that happened, and not only when you have the military come in, typically you have civilian contractors that will basically maintain sustaining operations. And so we had a ramp up of medical personnel to contracted through KBR, through a company called Loyal Source, and basically they had doctors, physicians, nurse practitioners, PAs, nurses, I mean the full gamut. At one point we had 4 ambulances on service 24 hours a day at Camp Atterbury. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but the thing is, the federal government's unique in the aspect that basically when you get into federal contracts, only certain people can talk to individuals on the civilian side. So I actually became the core contracting officer for the medical contract, which roughly was about $14 million a month. That I had to make sure that the government's paid appropriately. Mind you, I did not have any training prior to this. So typically it's a 40-hour week that you go to class, and again, since I was doing 19, 20-hour days, basically I got it in a weekend. So I became a core representative with all the responsibilities and all the ways they tell you how you can go to jail. And then with all of the other entities, because when we go through the presentation, I'm doing this on the front end just because if I stopped at each one and told the story, this circle, and it'll make sense as I go. But then I became the community medical liaison officer for the state of Indiana, representing Camp Atterbury. So the reason is because with all the medical entities, it's unique that, and for the military, it's like I don't talk medical, so therefore I need someone who does it. So, and as you see at the mission, I just wanted to highlight that part and I'll come back to it. So just a little background, everybody knows what happened with the downfall of Afghanistan and the withdrawal. So July and August were very busy months. Roughly 124,000 evacuees were evacuated from Kabul airport, and they went to what we call the lily pads. And the lily pads were in Germany and Qatar. And I apologize, there's a little off here. I'll try and incorporate that if I can. So, it advances automatically. And down here, is there a way we could zoom out just a little bit to, no? Okay. So down here is actually Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany. It's basically a tent city. And I will have these, Kelly can give these slides to anybody who'd like to keep them afterwards, and you can see, I have a lot of pictures. Basically, this is Ramstein's. It's a pretty impressive tent group. And over there is, many people saw all the evacuee pictures of all the Afghans getting on the planes and traveling. So the installation bases, so there were 8 bases, and of the 124,000, 64,000 refugees, Afghan refugees came to the US. So of the 8 bases, initially when it was stood up and people were being evacuated, Fort McCoy, Wisconsin was stood up, as well as Fort Dix, New Jersey. And then as the numbers started to increase, other bases turned on. Camp Atterbury was the 7th base to actually come or excuse me, 6th base to come on service. There's, since I can't see them, I have to look at the Fort Dix, Fort Lee, Virginia, Quantico, Virginia, which is a Marine base, also the FBI, Fort Pickett, which is a National Guard base in Virginia as well, and Camp Atterbury, Fort Bliss, and Holloman Air Force Base. So we truly encompass all of the DoD. So on September 1st, 2001, Governor Holcomb and Brigadier General Dale Lyles, is the Adjutant General for the National Guard, gave a press conference. And in their press conference said some very key things. One, we are bringing in, there will be 1,000 refugees coming in as soon as tomorrow. And, but we assure you, the hospitals will not be overrun. Doing that, not knowing what that means, logistics, and fairy dust and things happen. So what that means is Major Lee, make sure nobody leaves Camp Atterbury, make sure everything's taken care of. Well, we were still ramping up a lot of services, so therefore, wasn't doing treatment. However, the Navy was actually contracted to do the SIV physicals. So a part of the immigration process, the most important in the front end is the medical physical. You basically have to have a full, think of going to kindergarten. You're gonna get all your vaccinations, you're gonna have your clean bill of health, basically, and as you become a citizen, we welcome you and we basically assist that process. That's what the Navy was there. The contractors was unique because they were going to cover for the Navy, then the Navy was going to redeploy home, and they would do that and do treatment for the Afghans. However, in their contract, basically, they weren't even putting in IVs. So basically, when I'm getting a list of in the first couple days, we sent 25 Afghan children, refugees, to the hospital, had a small heart attack, and then basically a little yelled at and figure out what's happening. And so what I mentioned, why I became the Corps, because I needed to be able to talk the talk that they need so they would listen. And as that physician, they had to run things through me. So if they didn't honor our contract, basically they would get a negative outcome and we won't pay them. So obviously they didn't want that to happen. But it ended up being a great relationship throughout the process. Everybody was engaged. So honestly, after the learning curve, we roughly, and I'll hit highlights, I mean, we had 300 hospital visits in a 24-hour period at Camp Atterbury. And that's significant because one of the partners, Columbus Hospital, they're like, we had 105 hospital visits and we're just completely slammed. And we're seeing 3 times more than the trauma hospitals at times. So there was some kudos as it progressed later on. So here's the installation command team. What happens is Colonel Grunman is the post commander. He just happened to take over until June of 2021. So therefore he was really excited. And then Sergeant Major. And then at Camp Atterbury, it's a training installation base. So soldiers will come and deploy, and basically they'll get their external evaluation from the active duty group there. So these 2 commanders are typically full-time there. The actual operational leadership task force commander was Brigadier General Nev Nell. She's actually was a commandant of Fort Leonard Wood. She was background's an MP. She was the active duty DoD representative. The federal coordinating agency is basically along the FEMA regions, meaning there are 10 FEMA regions in the United States. And these are the medical liaison, these are the, there's gotta be a timer to this. These are the DoD representatives for those FEMA groups to do coordination with the DoD for disasters. So basically, whenever there's a disaster, these people are spun up. So every earthquake, every hurricane, think of something that you see the news basically in that region, these people are activated and how the military is going to help. And then because of the lines of different work environments, we had federal contractors, federal employees, and you had to have a federal head. So Aaron Batt, who's actually the director of the TSA at the Indianapolis airport, was nominated or voluntold that he was going to be the DHS federal coordinator, overseeing all the federal government overseeing all federal employees associated with the mission and volunteers. So this is a linear leadership, and when I talk about the org, I just want to give you some names because when I show you the org chart, it's a little bigger and see where they fall in, which is here. So the org chart starts with the President of the United States, the Department of Homeland Security, and then the Secretary of Defense and your DoD elements. So we have a 4-star command, 3-star command, and a 1-star, which is General Nell. And then these are the entities that were DoD representative at Camp Atterbury. And I'll just say that the Task Force Ghost has a unique lineage. That's the 2-7 Cavalry out of Fort Hood, Texas. And if you've ever seen We Were Soldiers, it is that group. Also, if you pay attention to the movie, it's the same group that General Custer led. So it has a long battle history, and so they were actually the forefront of the soldiers who operated our mare cells, and they took care of the Afghan guests. And when I show you the layout of the camp, it'll make a little bit more sense. And then Task Force Med. So this was all of the DoD, and I talked about the Navy, but we brought in a vet team from the active duty Army to do food control. We had U.S. Public health officers doing behavioral health. I mean, we had a true conglomerate, a morning meeting of, I think, 45 different entities overseeing the care of the guests. And then we had phenomenal NGO support and government support. So the American Red Cross, the Department of State, Department of Health and Human Services, and the FBI. That'll make more sense in a second. So here's the footprint of Camp Atterbury, and I think you can see most of it. I'll give you a little history tip of the Camp Atterbury, but basically it's broken up into 8 blocks, and roughly the main cantonment area, which is right here, can house comfortably 6,000 people, no, 5,000 people. And then we have a North Barracks complex essentially across the street that's named after Governor Mitch Daniels, and it can house 2,000, excuse me. And so the main area here we comfortably have 9,000 at Camp Atterbury in our full, during the summer month of the major training events. However, we can build out because Camp Atterbury is 43,000 square acres. We have plenty of space. And with military, we can put a tent anywhere. So literally, we could have the population of Indianapolis at Camp Atterbury in tents. Not ideal, but it could happen. So I'm not going to go over the other stuff, but I just want to give you the layout of what Camp Atterbury and how things are. Now, say we're food. So food typically was located in the 300 block. So basically, roughly around this hole is about a mile. So basically how it was set up in 1942 as a prisoner of war camp, basically it was being able to walk to all your necessities. So no matter what time of year. And so the Afghan guests started filling in from the 100 block all the way until they filled in. The 700 block was reserved for the DoD personnel, but we used the first 5 blocks to actually house on this side 4,000 and 2,000 over at North Barracks. And then we tried to mirror all the life-sustaining support at North Barracks main cantonment that North Barracks has. But it's like going on a deployment. You have the nice PX or the nice store, and then you'll get a trailer at the other side. So we had improvements to make. So I will tell you that the motto is every day will be better. And honestly, it was. And so therefore, whatever the problem was today, it was eventually solved, but it wasn't the same problem yesterday. So kind of a timeline I wanted to give you. A lot of it's busy, and you can't see in the back, but I wanted to give you, so we got the warning order roughly August 18th. We found out the 29th of August that we were actually going to get turned on, and everyone started flowing in. General Nell basically assumed August 28th, the defense coordinator, so all these people started filling in. The the cavalry unit from Texas basically were like, your bags are packed, because initially we were stood up, then it was stood down, and then ramped back up. And so then bringing all these people had to be indoctrinated. Here's your roles, your responsibilities. Again, I often told this story, that we are literally building the plane as it's flying and it's burning. So, so we, on September 2nd is the first guest flight. So when the first guest actually was 700 passengers that came in, and I'll go through that process of what that is in a little bit. And they were restricted to base, but nobody was held captive. I refer to the refugees as guests, and pretty much probably be the last time I use a refugee, because we never did. They were true guests. We had the motto from they are truly welcome. Anything we had to give them, it was for them. And if they wanted to leave, they could. And a part of the SIV process, which I'll talk about now, but I highlight a bit more. So when you're doing the citizen process, typically when you're in another country, it takes about 2 years. So you'll get the physical, you'll get the investigation, you have to do all these things. We had to do this in an accelerated capacity. If you basically go through all the steps, you will increase your chance to citizenship very quickly. So there was that carrot. And again, but you had to do everything. And then there are some individuals who already have family members here that are like, I can get you set up and you can just come here and we'll do it. The issue is essentially just the physical alone is $500. And if you, either that's out of pocket, basically if you don't do it with us, it's out of pocket. Or you have to find a different resettlement agency to help that process. So if you have, you're linked up, your family members are linked up with a resettlement agency locally to wherever they are, they may be able to work that process. So that wasn't a bad thing that people actually left because they were able to reunite with their loved ones. But it trended every day. Like we were always tracking, okay, this group left because of this issue. I will say the biggest thing with this mission in the very beginning was the disinformation. If you can imagine that basically being in middle southern Indiana, Camp Atterbury, for those who don't know, is east of Edinburgh, Indiana. There's a nice outlet mall, and just north of Columbus, Indiana. And this is the comments of there are terrorists coming, they're wearing bombs. I mean, social media was bad. So that's hence why the governor did a press conference, and Colonel Grunman leaned forward and started holding town halls for all the municipalities, talking to the police, talking to the fire, all the emergency services, because what was unique is on the lily pads, people would get cell phones, but they had limited minutes, and essentially the only function on a cell phone that doesn't have minutes is 911. So the Afghan guests were, I need to know where to get food, and they're calling 911. So it was really new, and it was a learning experience. Every day was better. I'll just keep saying that. So I will say the numbers here. We started September 1, 77, then 700 on the 2nd, and it trended up. And on September 10th, we froze, at September 11th, we actually froze at 6,600. And there was a reason why. At Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, there was a positive measles case. Measles is extremely contagious. And in fact, if you were at the same airport, you were now a potential victim. So everyone gets here, within 48 hours, we gave 6,400 immunizations, because we had about 200 kids who didn't qualify yet, but in 48 hours. And so that was a direct effort with the Department of Health for Indiana, and Dr. Box and her team were phenomenal, and just leaning forward, and we were able to execute that. So, and then we also at that time had about 1,400 DoD support personnel assisting with the mission. So talk the lines of effort and kind of the main things, and this is an Army term, and I stole this slide from one of the presentations to the Chief of the National Guard Bureau. So it's going crazy. Okay. The number one line of effort, guest care. Obviously, and we're thinking Maslow's needs. You're going to get them settled, medical first. Within 24 hours, you actually had a screening. We started that process on every person, just to start, just to get them going, because again, they want to start life. They've just been through a phenomenal traumatic event. I mean, most of the people, their entire belongings were in a suitcase or a trash bag, or they're not even there. So literally people with the shirts on their back. And so get them food, get them billing. The SHOT-X is what we call the immunization that we had. That was a priority. Getting the clothes and needs and the volunteer donations and activities going. And I gotta say, with all the wonderful love of all the different agencies, it was phenomenal to see, and I'll touch base on it, but it was, I mean, every person who had nothing was fully clothed and dressed for winter and prepared to go to the next thing with a bag. So people truly left better than they came. The medical side, and we're the citizen I talked about in the biometrics, so fingerprinting, DNA, it's part of the citizenship, and the International Rescue Committee, they are the kind of lead agency to help coordinate that, and then the International Organization of Migration basically directed all of the resettlement agencies as the process. So it was always a moving entity. And then line of effort 3 was, as we know, the disinformation was the community engagement. And so how I got involved, again, after Dr. Box, I brought in all the CEOs and the chief medical officers of every hospital in the mid-Indianapolis, Indiana area, and gave them an overview of, this is the true picture of what we're looking at. And the reason is because Dr. Box, she called the tag and said that there are 10,000 pregnant women coming to Camp Atterbury, and now again, hence why he said we're not gonna overrun the system. Again, that disinformation. There were pregnant women, there were active babies being born coming here, but there weren't 10,000. And then also, but I will tell you, people got off the bus with unique diseases. And I will highlight Riley Hospital a bit more, but I will tell you, the very first group of 77 that showed up on the day 1, we had a child who was 5 who had to go immediately to the hospital because they just looked not good, and they ended up having a gallbladder surgery. But the thing is, the gallbladder had a tumor around it. It was so unique that the surgeon called me again, because I talked to all of these people at all hours, and he's like, I had to Google what this was. I don't remember this from med school. And that was the initial first patient that they saw. So all of the tropical diseases that we don't deal with in the Midwest are now a thing. Not like what monkeypox now that we're kind of moving forward towards. All right, so the resettlement process and kind of what happened with the mayor cells. I told you those soldiers in the blocks, they basically were the life support entity, and they got to know these families and intimately, and they protected them, they housed them, they got them to all of the moving pieces that they didn't know where to go, but they actually were able to get them there. It was a phenomenal effort to see a lot of young boys and girls from Texas come and just help people. They're all infantry people, they like to shoot, and that was not this mission. So it was really cool to see. IRCs, I apologize for the advancing here. IRC, again, they will start the intake process, and the DHS, that had to go into a specific government system that's proprietary and extremely antiquated, but it was also growing and improving. They had to have full security backgrounds. Now, we did find a couple people, which was unique in Afghanistan, that they had such a database of information. If you were a suspect and you had a fingerprint on an IED, basically you went into a database. And basically those people just popped up. There were a couple people across the country that the FBI grabbed, and they had to have something else. If we identified anybody who was not going to be US friendly, we, believe it or not, Croatia would take them. So 67,000 came to the United States, the 120,000 went to different places in the world. I don't know those numbers, but I know Croatia was specifically anyone who had a history, an affiliation with Al-Qaeda, they went to Croatia. The task force med, the medical screening, I hit on earlier, they are seeing the follow-up. So, and the interesting thing with medical, it wasn't a one-stop shop, because essentially you start your series of vaccinations. For the time you're at Camp Atterbury, you were up to date on all vaccinations. All general, so varicella, which is chickenpox, measles, mumps, rubella. Part of this was actually getting the COVID vaccine. If you didn't get it, you basically are negating this. So actually there were no people who ever had an issue. They obviously wanted it because they came from a country and they wanted to be protected. And then the IOMs, the force, and this is when you're getting to the resettlement. So you actually, these are stages, and it takes a week or two. There are some people who are fast-tracked for different reasons, and then travel arrangements to the resettlement. It was unique in when people would resettle, because essentially they were initially asked, do you have any family member or friend locally or in the United States that we can assist you with? And then there was a group who like, nowhere, and I want to move to New York. And no, you can go to Utah, because this was, again, we had to match the capabilities of organizations that will be successful in sustaining these people. They did get a stipend. Congress did pass a law that they would get a stipend for up to 8 months of assistance to help them in the resettlement process, plus all of the care and everything that they needed. They did have an insurance, so still to this day, I get calls from individuals looking for records for individuals who are at Camp Atterbury. And mind you, none of these people are here now, but I still get calls at least 2 or 3 times a week. And the most recent was like, hey, I have this bill, what do you do for it? And there was an organization by HHS that actually paid those bills out. So the organization, I talked on these, so the Department of State was essentially the lead, and then co-located with the Department of Homeland Security and the DoD, with specifically the Army. We had 175 federal and state employees. We had 1,300 DoD staff members and contractors, and we had 23 non-government agencies. So basically, wonderful organizations that just help, and the Salvation Army was a part of that. I just didn't have it as the main effort, because these were the leads for different reasons. Going back, I will just go back. So Team Rubicon was the lead for the donation for, what did I do? Kelly. What's that?
What side were you on?
I'll go back. 3 slides. One more. This one, okay. All right, I'm gonna stick right here. All right. So, I mentioned the IOM, the US CIS is the resettlement. The IRC, those are the actual resettlement agencies. KBR was a contract for mentioned all the contractors that would come in and provide life-saving support. We had cleaning services, toiletries, plumbing, everything. All of the medical people were basically under the KBR umbrella. That name is synonymous with a lot of DoD contracts overseas. In fact, KBR was the main contractor for the Afghan mission for many years. But what I was saying when I lost, Team Rubicon was the repository director of all the donations. So they were the ones that were actually, and we'll touch on that in a minute. The American Red Cross was there early, providing things. So what happened was, again, people didn't have the clothes on their back. So blankets, necessities, children would have formula.
So one of our, I'm sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
one of our ambassadors, one of our members is an ambassador for Coats for Kids.
Uh-huh.
And
They were involved.
Salvation Army donated a large portion of the coats.
Yep.
To a couple thousand, maybe 1,000.
Oh, more than a couple. There were quite a few. And then we had another organization and we had to actually purchase shoes. Because I would say 75% didn't have shoes of individuals, all ages. Again, you're coming to Indiana in September, going into October. It started getting cold. So there was a time frame to what we were looking. In fact, I'll go back. There was a time frame when we were looking at, okay, Indian operations, getting everybody resettled. Fort McCoy, Wisconsin was supposed to be an enduring base. It was the second base that was turned on, and it was going to last. They turned it off because it can get 23 below zero during the winter. And 5,000 people were in tents. So they had to decompress that base sooner than later. Again, I gotta give National Guard shout out because, again, I worked there. I'm one of the AGR, one of the 16. And what's funny is, as we gave our every other day brief or whatnot, it was like, when do these people go back to their normal jobs? And everyone was like, didn't have a date. And then it turned in, after I became the community liaison, indefinite. Basically, it was told by the tag that I could not leave this operation as long as it was going on. Yes. Oh, okay. We did have, I'll go through this. Hospital organizations that actually helped. Here's the donations, and we had a warehouse. There were 2,100,000 and some donations that we had in the warehouse. Ultimately, we couldn't utilize all the donations that we had, and it was timely because the tornado that happened in Kentucky, actually all of those donations went to. Community outreach, Governor Holcomb, I explained that. All of the congressional members of Indiana did come down, all of the generals on the DoD side. So basically every head of state and the organization came to Camp Atterbury. We were actually labeled the gold star of the resettlement agencies for everything that we did and the compassion and care. Most important slide I want to say, so Riley was phenomenal in this. We sent 380 hospital visits to Riley. That's a pretty significant number in roughly a 5-month period. And with the complication of more likely they didn't speak English, things like that. And Riley bent over backwards. We had soldiers at every hospital, and they were able to assist, and they kept them, they housed them, they took care of them. And then Riley, I nominated Riley as the healthcare heroes, and they actually won. So that was actually really cool. So 33 babies were born, medical highlights. We gave 69,000 vaccinations. We did over 6,000 COVID testing. Everyone got tested for COVID every 5 days. The highlight of that is we had 102 of 7,207 guests test positive for COVID. We had a true bubble. We lost the bubble basically at Christmas because all the Americans went back home to Texas. They came back, they had COVID, and then that's when it got. But we kept it compressed, and it was only 102. So that was, and so we had less than 1% positivity rate. And then again, at one point, we had up to 300 guests a day in the ICU that were being taken care of. And roughly the last slide are basically, we had a couple getting married. There were a couple actually that participated in a wedding at Camp Atterbury. And this is a mural that actually was at the airport, and it should be doing